And now I invite you all to explore the novel ways to reproduce the texture of animal-based whole muscle cuts. Martin Habfast, co-founder of Umiami, is here to tell us all about it. Hello.
All right, can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay, so I'll start this with a simple question. Who here in this room is vegetarian? A few people over there, I'd say about 5, 6 perhaps in the room. Who's vegan? Anyone? Also 2, 3 people? Fantastic. So who eats meat or fish still? All right, perfect, fantastic. Well, for instance, what was the last meat you bought in the supermarket? Turkey, okay. And you over there?
The last meat
that you bought in the supermarket, yeah. Okay, fantastic. Well, I don't eat meat anymore, but I still do store checks. And when I go in the supermarket and I go into the meat aisle, typically what I see, it's that, right? So chicken breast. And if I go in the red meat section, I'll see, perhaps tenderloins or ribs, right? But if I go into the plant-based meat section, this is what I typically see. Chicken nuggets, chicken tenders, burger patties. So there's kind of a gap here, right? And so that's what we'll be exploring today. So my name is Martin. I'm the co-founder of Umiami, a company that is aiming to bridge that gap, but more on that later. So we'll be discussing 3 topics today. The first one is, why care about this issue? Why care about whole cuts, whole muscle pieces at all? Why is it so hard to replicate a whole muscle piece using plant proteins? And what can you do as a plant-based meat company to bridge that gap? So, why care about whole muscle pieces? And let me give you 2 figures here. There are about 330 million Americans, if we take the US, for instance. In 2020, only 73 million Americans had eaten chicken nuggets. But 250 million Americans had had a chicken breast, okay? So it's pretty clear that meat consumption, animal meat consumption, evolves around whole muscle pieces. Actually, as a matter of fact, the flagship product when it comes to plant-based meat is a hamburger, which is kind of weird because hamburgers are only the 5th most consumed meat in America, which is like the country when it comes to hamburgers. So that's a big problem. And it's a big problem because we're trying basically to address the problem of meat consumption by offering only alternatives to products that really only represent 20 to 35% of meat consumption. So that's a big, big issue. And so if we do that, obviously it's going to be hard for plant-based meat to really take off. And it's not a surprise that today this category is kind of plateauing if we only address part of the need. We're already asking a lot from the consumer, right? We're asking them to switch from an animal protein to a plant protein, buying products that are more expensive with ingredient lists that aren't clear. So it's kind of hard to also ask them to switch their consumption patterns. So why is it so hard to reproduce whole muscle pieces? Now, the short answer is fibers, right? When you look at an animal muscle, it mostly consists of long fibers, a long fibrous structure, right? And replicating that with plant protein is extremely complicated. Most plant-based meat companies today, like Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, they use mostly one technology to create their alternatives, which is called dry extrusion. And the principle is basically to apply pressure and temperature on water and proteins to get what we call TVPs, right? Which are basically something that looks like puffed rice. Those TVPs contain many small fibers which are crushed together and rehydrated together with fat, colors, flavors, and whatnot. And that's then molded into a burger patty or a nugget or a sausage, you name it. Now, the problem is if you do that, you cannot really control the fiber directionality, right? Because the way this technology works is that it creates a puffing, so it creates a lot of small disorganized fibers. And you can't really create long fibers and this complex fiber structure that is typical in animal meat, right? And then you have a few other limitations. A big limitation, for instance, is marbling. If you want to create long fibers, but you also want to have fat marbled into that structure, that's very, very complex, obviously. And you have your usual suspects that make it hard to replicate an entire piece of meat using plant proteins, such as flavors, fat, and whatnot. So it's very complicated. So what can you do as a plant-based meat company or a CPG company to bridge that gap? Well, there's the quick and dirty route, which basically consists in saying, well, TVPs is enough, right? So I'll still use this dry extrusion technology. I'll just tightly pack the TVPs together, kind of make it look like a whole muscle, and as much as I can. And that kind of works, right? I mean, the advantage of that is that it's very easy to do. You can do it with existing technologies and with your existing industrial setup, right? And you can release products, quite quickly. But it's kind of like a V1, right? It's kind of like the level of quality that we had with plant-based meat substitutes 5 years ago. The other option is more expensive, way more lengthy, and it consists in creating your own protein texturization technology, right? To develop an alternative to extrusion, to create those long fibers that resemble meat. And some companies do that, right? So they'll, for instance, create a technology called shear cell. So you can look it up on YouTube, for instance. There are some pretty interesting videos of people explaining how that works. Some people work with biomass fermentation, right? To create fiber structure. The problem with that is that if that is not your core competency to solve, this texturizing issues, is that it takes a lot of time and it involves a lot of cash. Let me show you what a typical timeline looks like if you want to solve that problem. You need 2 or 3 years of lab development, which would typically cost you around, 2 million euros. Then you'd need 2 or 3 years of pilot development. And by the time you arrive at pilot scale, you need about 5 million euros a year in terms of cash burn. And then you need a ticket of about 15 to 40 million euros to build actually a full-scale factory. Now, that's a very lengthy timeline, and that's a bloody lot of money, right? And a lot of risk, because at every stage of the process, you don't know whether you're gonna make it to the next phase. And some technologies are extremely hard, if not impossible, to scale inherently, right? So, if you're a CPG company, if you're a plant-based meat company, trying to solve this issue with this route can be extremely risky and extremely lengthy, right? So is there not a third way of doing this? And so that's where we come in, actually, at Umiami. So that's the point in the presentation where I'll do a little bit of advertisement about our company. So Umiami is a company that actually went through that timeline I showed you, but that is actually already at the very end of it, and that is providing a turnkey solution so you don't have to do it yourself, right? So we basically created an alternative to extrusion to texturize plant proteins and to create those long fibers of meat using very, very simple ingredients such as these here. And right now we're exiting the pilot phase and entering the full-scale phase. We actually bought a factory from Unilever in Strasbourg, close to Germany, in France, where we're actually scaling that technology this year, so by the end of the year, to a throughput of 1.8 metric tons an hour. And we sell this in B2B. So typically, that chicken breast that you can see here, this whole muscle chicken breast, we sell it as is, bulk, frozen, naked, to CPGs, to industrials, to plant-based meat companies, so that they can reuse it under their own brand as an ingredient, right? They can fry it, they can marinate it, they can cut it, and whatever they want to do with it, right? So that's it for today. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, or just to ask them right away here. Yes?
Do
Yeah.
you have any to try?
Sorry, what's that?
Do you have any product to try?
I don't have here. I actually wasn't allowed to cook them. But you can reach out to me and we can organize a tasting for sure. Absolutely, that's not a problem. Any other questions? Nope? Yeah?
I'll try one.
continue. Sorry.
Yep.
Serge Ravji, Cardigan Capital VC. The whole area of veg, meat, especially when we talk about Beyond Meat and everything else, and there's been a huge, and now all of a sudden it's,
Yep.
Things aren't happening as we expected them to happen. Okay. So my question is, why do you think that is? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the follow-up question is it only about whole cuts, or is it about a lot more than that? And what I've been hearing is the uptake hasn't been as profound as we expected, mm-hmm. because of other factors such as taste and nutrition and things like that. So I just wanted to get your view on you being in that area, what you thought about what was going on and the future. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I think you gave part of the answer here. We're basically in a category or an industry where the expectation or the promise that brands are giving to consumer is a product that is exactly like meat, but doesn't have all the problems that come with meat in terms of environmental impact and health and whatnot. The problem is it doesn't live up to that expectation, right? I mean, you have products that just doesn't taste as good as meat on average, that are more expensive than meat, right? The health impact is not that clear at all, right? And so you're basically relying on consumers wanting to accept that huge price premium and that on average lower quality just for environmental or animal welfare reasons, right? And I think that's totally unrealistic to expect from consumers. So we need to have products that actually reach, price parity, that actually reach taste parity, and that can actually claim that they're healthier and that have the right label to do so, right? So that's definitely one. And then two, I think product diversity is also definitely one, right? I mean, consumers only eat that many burgers and nuggets a year, right? As shown. I know. Did I answer your question? Do you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there are a number of factors. Definitely you mentioned a few of them, but there's a whole area there that needs to be, especially when it comes to consumers, that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Yes.
Just wait a second. I will give you a microphone. Everyone.
Thank you. I noticed the example on the slide was based on soya protein. Are you looking at other protein options as well?
Absolutely. It's a good question. So the protein texturization technology we've created, it works with a whole lot of proteins. It works with pea protein and whatnot. And then again, it's a matter of what do you prioritize. Soy protein has two main advantages. A, it's extremely functional, so you can get really good tasting products, more easily. That's A. And then B, it's much more available, and it's also more cost effective. And when you look at the barriers to consumption in the world of, plant-based meat, it's A, taste, B, price, right? So, the choice here, at least in our case, has been to focus on those two main barriers and to use soy because soy best tackles those.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for your questions.